Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to SIA Conversations. Today we are going to have another conversation on the IMF program and the continuing problems of Pakistan. As you all know, we have had 25 programs and we never seem to achieve our, stability. We celebrate stability, the little stability that we get. We start celebrating doing bhangra and saying we've got stabilization like we are doing now. But we all know it'll last another few months and we'll back another fun negotiation. So the question that I'm asking many of the Pakistan's leading thinkers is, how do we get out of this mess? What would you advise the fund to do to get us out of this mess? After all, the fund is a multilateral organization. It's not a profit-making body. So what are the suggestions of the Pakistani thinkers to the fund? I know the fund doesn't want to talk to Pakistani thinkers. They only talk to Pakistani officials. But that's something that we can correct by raising our voices. So I've got Haroon Sharif with me today. You know, he was the former Minister for Investments, has had a long career in SECP and many other places in Pakistan. A well-known TV commentator, thinker, writer. So let's ask Haroon today, former investment minister. What do you think, Haroon, is the problem? Why can we not get out of the IMF emergency war, as I like to call it?
Well, I personally think, first of all, thank you very much for having me on this chat. It is the mindset which is the problem. It's a mindset of dependence. It is a mindset of very short-term populist transactions rather than a mindset of a policy shift where you actually change the structure of our economy and systems which are not capable of taking us out of IMF or catering 250 million people. Now, changing the mindset, when I look at Asian countries, some of the East Asian countries very successfully did that. They did a transformation because the elite sat down and they basically changed the mindset that let's, take advantage of geopolitics and start doing exports. And it was rather they governed the market rather than let the market play openly. But it worked for them. So they never went to IMF, and Thailand went to IMF, and then they immediately, opted out. So in Pakistan, I think we deep down, it's a defeatist mindset of our ruling elite, which is actually looking at just a breather for 6 to 8 months. And,
my ruling elite, think about it. Our Prime Minister is covering maybe 1 million miles a year to try and beg Saudi Arabia. I think he's gone for the 4th time to Saudi Arabia and China, etc., etc. So they feel that the solution is really, and the fund has given that feeling too, the financing gap that needs to be covered. And they're covering the financing gap. So what's wrong with that?
Well, it's a cash flow led approach that you get an injection of cash flow in shape of debt, which we have been, using our so-called geopolitical or diplomatic position to get it. It has no economic basis. I give you an example because I've been part of such, delegations. So when we first went to Saudi Arabia, so we negotiated 3 deals. Number one was injection of a deposit in central bank, which was the cash flow injection, a debt instrument for a year. Second was basically a deferred oil payment, another debt, but a deferred oil payment for another 2 years. And to give you another space so that you can manage your, expenses. And the third was, which I was leading, that an investment proposition. When we were coming back in the plane, I told my colleagues, the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister and Finance Minister, that if you get the cash flow and you get the deferred oil facility, you'll forget about investment because you will get the breathing space for a year. Now, the country has set up an economy which basically works on historically geopolitical bargains rather than a competitive base which can sustain, the inflow of dollars and other things. And we still think that we are relevant geopolitically and with these so-called friendly countries. we will continue, borrowing this money. The debt, by the way, of friendly countries have crossed $34 billion. It is 4 times more than Paris Club's debt. So it's basically taking easy path, taking the debt and, buying some time. Now, with that mindset, you are absolutely right. I don't see you have any other option but to stay with this whole Bretton Woods system, to stay dependent. That's a club. You have been part of it. I've been part of it from the other side. So this club, there's a big client, Pakistan, by the way. I don't think IMF would like, now the world is changing and pressures are coming. But previously, it's a great client. World Bank says, we will put in $2 billion a year, for next 10 years in this country because this can absorb this kind of money.
But tell me, supposing now you became the prime minister or you had major influence on policy, what would you suggest that the government does? Or alternatively, let me put it another way. Let's say the IMF mission comes to you and says, Haroon Sahab, we are very sincere in trying to get Pakistan to achieve long-term sustainability. So what should we do? So what are the key reforms that you would suggest, short-term, long-term?
Well, if I am listened to, it's very unlikely, because there is no culture of reaching out to people and listening to them and giving space. There are certain countries which are ready for transformation. They create space for professionals, give them respect, and listen to them. We only create space for consultants and just show some of the things, a report or something, and then we forget about it. But if I'm there, I first of all like to tell my colleagues that it is the policy shift which will take us out. It is not the deals and transactions and populist programs which will take us out. And that's what I say. The leadership has to change the mindset of the people around them, particularly bureaucracy, which keeps on feeding them how to go about it. Second, in terms of priorities, I'll cut the government by half because it is irrelevant, not the core government. We have, hundreds of guest houses and hundreds of subordinate departments which are eating out public money, and put that money in a productive use where, which can attract private capital. So that's the way you can. Third is, all investment is not good. In fact, it's quite bad for a country which is very fragile in terms of its macroeconomic stability and cash flow situation. So I would basically stop investment in, areas where people come and make money and take dollars out. What we need to, I would rather put some filters of policy. That is it creating jobs? Is it enhancing productivity? Is it enhancing production? Is it taking us, in the upper chain of emerging technologies? That investment is good. We start selling all kind of investment that a restaurant is coming and, multinational is coming, which is buying things from outside, selling it here, taking money out, or assembling things which are not really manufacturing. So I think these are few things. I don't think I would like to advise doing many things. I see prime ministers trying to do everything. You have 24 hours in a day, set 2, 3. If one thing starts working, people will start believing in you that this country is serious about taking a path which is getting out of this debt dependence and bailouts. It's not
So,
IMF bailout, it's a friendly countries bailout as well. It's not IMF. I think I will widen the definition. It is basically how can Pakistan get out of these cash flow bailouts?
fair point. Now tell me that I think that's very well put. The issue really is, I think the IMF also find it very difficult to comprehend. The menu of reforms that need to be undertaken is so huge that we don't know where to begin. And so we end up drawing these huge consultant matrices and everybody gets confused. What should we do? And the matrix also contains them to put the lamp here, put the table here, put this here. Those things are irrelevant. What are the major things that you think should be done. For example, I'll take you to a very specific sector which has been talked about all the time. Throughout my life, we've talked about it, and I guess it's the heart of development, the energy sector. We have failed miserably in organizing the energy sector. The deficits keep mounting, the problems keep mounting. So now we are suddenly on to killing the solar system. 2 years ago, somebody put out a video just now. This prime minister was saying all the time, please put on more solar, put on more solar. And if you recall, 10 years ago, this prime minister sitting near the Lahore fort, holding a fan and saying we need more energy. And they put in more of these IPPs. So we've been meandering from IPPs to solar and back and forth, etc. But we cannot seem to make an energy system. So what should we do in the energy system?
No, energy system is just one major example which has become a fault line or a major barrier to, revival of growth in Pakistan. And there are, again, I will go to my basic question that, did you, invest in a proper energy policy at the times of IPP? We did not. Okay. Then we basically become reactive and try and disband that policy and get some populist points. Today, in fact, I've just tweeted on, the power minister's tweet that, the solar thing, what we have done on net metering, it will still create incentives for consumers. So my question to that is that where is the policy consistency? First, you make bad policies. Then you basically keep on changing every couple of years what you're saying. And so you lose, interest of any kind of investors. Now, I had Chinese and other investors trying to invest in manufacturing of solar panels here. Now, all of them has taken a backseat because there is no consistency in policy, right? Second is there is very little investment in bureaucracy, which basically can understand the economic issues with a lens of growth and revival. They do day to day. They still think you have been part of the government. They still think a PowerPoint presentation is a policy, and their bosses also buy it. Now, the question again I will raise to you, take power sector as one, major barrier to Pakistan's, revival and growth. In fact, existence, it is an existential threat to economy in several ways. Now, can't you just put people of credibility who have done it, in other places or here, and basically give them space? Decisions should be taken by the parliament, taken by the cabinet, but it's not cabinet's job to micromanage. We discuss these presentations and things at the prime minister's level. So give it to them, delegate it to people who can do it, trust them, respect them, and, so-called political cost, take it. You are already taking it by making false statements and giving disinformation to people. I would say start small. For instance, if you had in the advice of World Bank disintegrated, WAPTA into discourse, distribution systems. Now you are saying these are bad, we want to privatize it, right? Now, you have just let me know which successful privatization we have done in the recent past. Now, what other lesson do we need that we are not capable? What is privatization? It's a simple auction house. You convert it into ministries and then put huge number of bureaucrats with no knowledge. And then you expect a result that, we can, deal with this issue. I think it's not complicated. Consultants and these consultations make it sound complicated. It is basically trusting a few professionals and delegating power, which bureaucracy obviously will not let it happen because of their, vested interests. But I think it's a political decision. Somebody has to stand tall and take a political decision that yes, business of life will be done differently. We don't see that leadership now or in the near future. But one day, hopefully in 10 years' time, younger people will come and somebody will realize and stand up. That's how I see it.
So basically what I read is you're saying the problem is the bureaucracy which wants to centralize everything, right? They want
it is a collusion or of bureaucracy and political elite. It's not only one way, because I don't think bureaucracy can control politics unless politics sees some gains out of that, partnership.
Okay. So basically, you're saying that the centralized system that we have, which is the bureaucratic system, where, for example, everything goes to the secretary. I mean, the way I look at it is, correct me if I'm wrong, there are about 5 secretaries that run the country. And yes, on top of them, they have 5 ministers who also sort of run the country.
Yeah.
But again, the way it runs is, and you've seen it, I've seen it. The prime minister has some cronies. He doesn't talk to the whole cabinet. He doesn't even need to talk to the whole cabinet. He talks to a few cronies, and that's mostly after hours. But on the other side, there is the PSPM who controls his agenda. And the second thing is the military advisor who controls his agenda. Now, the PSPM is a crony of the 5 secretaries around the country. Take the Secretary of Finance, for example, or take the Secretary Planning, maybe, because he controls a large part of the budget. Take Cabinet Secretary, take Interior Secretary, and I guess that's about all. I can't think of any. The other secretaries are kind of peripheral. So the PSPM and these guys get together and they run a network, and the Prime Minister and his cronies get together and run a network. Now, anything that happens in the power sector goes there. The decision can't be taken by the power minister or anybody, it just goes there. So this extreme centralization is hurting the economy. That's one thing. The second thing that
Hurting everything. It's not economy, every decision, because you delegate things to provinces, but then you try and do. For instance, somebody called me that Prime Minister has made a task force to do agriculture sector reforms. Now, federation technically has very little to do with agriculture. So when you centralize everything and don't consult to professionals and don't reach out to federating units, and there is no local government anyways, so why do we expect a result? So we shouldn't expect, a positive result.
good point. Now, Trump has disbanded the Department of Education. Should be a very good signal. We should disband the Department of Education in the federation. Let the minister, and of course, local government, as you said, is very important. No, nobody wants to make local government. So maybe the IMF can put a condition saying, hey, we want the local government to happen like next program or next, review. Second thing is, what about the PSTP? Are you for keeping the PSTP? Or I think, quite frankly, we should get rid of the PSTP. It has become a political tinderbox. Shall we waste so much money in politics in the PSTP. MNAs are given funds. They do whatever they like. There's a huge amount of cronies in PSTP. Shall we, for example, get rid of the PSTP?
Well, I think Pakistan is a classic example of what Weber said about bureaucracy, that, it will continue maximizing budgets, will not decentralize, and keep it extremely secretive, not transparent. Okay? That is what we see. We continue maximizing budgets. We don't open up to people or disclose it. And, keep on, doling out taxpayers' money for your political and personal gains. You are saying about PSDP, I think the whole planning commission should be closed down. What if you do an independent, assessment of planning commission? I doubt it in the past 30 years it has delivered anything. So why do you want to keep, there are efficiency audits of ministries. There are modern tools, how you look at spending reviews and things. We do not, these donors, this from the countries they come, and I have been part of those, as you know, we used to do all these things in the donor country. There's a spending review every year. There's a comprehensive spending review after 3 years in UK. And then if you see a department is not delivering the objectives they agreed to, you cut down the budgets by half and redistribute, Now that is what is not actually either preached here nor practiced here. So I think a number of people, there is no function of centralized planning as a part of, centralized controlled economies of the past. So we need to let go, but we can't let go. I only give you example, not only government departments and perks and privileges. We don't want to let go assets. We don't want to let go power. We don't want to create space for new ideas. So when you don't want to let go and what you are calling centralized, you start second guessing things which you do not know at all. Why I resigned, one of the main things was that people who had no clue, whatever I would advise the prime minister, they would second guess and they would prevail. this small informal circle which you are talking. So I basically questioned myself and then went to the Prime Minister and said, look, if a Nobel laureate or somebody who has better knowledge than me second guesses me, I would welcome. But if somebody I know who's a crony and he has a vested interest in second guessing and putting my suggestions into a file, then you really don't need me. You can put anybody, for that purpose. So at this point in time, Pakistan does not value the real advice, the honest advice, or the professionalism. We continue working old school, post-colonial mindset of extractive, mindset with you keep on taking rents from people and don't redistribute, just redistribute among cronies. Isko torna, to break this whole vicious cycle, it is a political decision. Now
No, of course,
can
it's a political
push
decision.
them? I doubt it.
Should we have these? For example, I agree with you on the Planning Commission. Yes, get rid of it. But I can think of so many agencies that need to be gotten rid of. For example, take TDAP. What does TDAP do? Exports never
Absolutely.
go up.
And then they have
TDAP
training
keeps circling the
institutes.
world, enjoying themselves.
But I now, I have no problem, but I can give names. When I
Mhm.
was in the cabinet, I told the foreign minister that this whole institution of commercial counselors
Mhm.
hasn't delivered, right? And I gave him example of 8 countries where they had merged commerce ministries and foreign ministries. Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Now, I had our mentor and good friend Sartaj Aziz Saab. I had a discussion with him when he was foreign minister. And
Mhm.
at that time, his number two, the secretary who was sitting, he said, "Sir, what Mr. Sharif is talking, there will be blood on the streets." I quote the word. That's what he said.
I've heard
So
that many. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
now, when I told Shah Mahmood Qureshi at that time, and he and Tamina Janjua agreed that let's talk to Ministry of Commerce. But at that time, the Ministry of Commerce, the advisor Razak Daud and Yunus Thaka, they got furious. They said,
Mhm.
this is a discussion we don't want to get into. Now, the
Right.
question is, I wasn't saying you decide. I was saying that you improve the effectiveness of an institution. I gave an alternative. I said National Bank of Pakistan has 55 branches in different countries. Okay. Staff does nothing, but at least they are bankers. Why can't we use them as our commercial or investment officers? You cut down why embassy only. And why do we need a commercial officer in places like Ghana or Kenya and everywhere, Hungary? So now, but I thought that was a small thing, but that became such a huge issue
Right.
that people got extremely upset. So we are not ready. I spoke to Mahathir Mohamad about it. 3 times I met him. I was very fortunate. And in one-to-one meeting, I said, sir, please tell me, what did you do? What can we do? And he's a thoughtful man. He said, you are not ready for it. So don't push. And I think he was spot on.
Mhm. But tell me, I mean, I agree with you entirely on this, that commercial officers, if you recall, when I was in the Commerce Ministry, I tried to argue on commercial officers too and they threw me out. Fair enough. But the point is, let's move on. Take Board of Investment, for example. Investment GDP ratio has never increased. So should we have Board of Investment? Not just one. We've got 5 Board of Investments. Every province has one too. Should we have Board of Investment? And what are they doing if investment GDP? I mean, for example, if you go to performance-based budgeting, somebody should say, hey guys, investment GDP ratio has never crossed 15. So now you should go. Export GDP ratio has never crossed 10. So you should go. And railways, for example, why do we have a railways division? We should have a railways corporation, I agree, but not a division. Even energy, I would say we should not have a division. So I think the first thing is they keep talking about downsizing the government, but then we form a committee and we forget about it. Every government forms a committee to do this, so that we forget about it. Now the second thing is I want to
You know what British say about the committees and commissions.
yeah.
So they say when you don't want to do things, you make a committee.
Sir
But when
Humphrey,
you absolutely don't want to do things, you make a commission. So I
Sir
think they are
Humphrey,
pretty right.
Humphrey, if you recall, when he didn't want the minister to do something, he would say, yes, minister. I will put it to the parliamentary subcommittee, and then I will take it to the bureaucratic subcommittee, then I'll take it to the third subcommittee. So when he got to the fifth sort of subcommittee or whatever, the minister would say, Humphrey, in a word. Humphrey would say, in a word, no, minister. So I think that's standard. But let me,
No, but let me answer your question on look, technically, there was nothing wrong with Planning Commission being not a ministry, just a technical advisory body. If you read the, the terms of reference
sure,
and the statutory
sure.
structure, Board of Investment was never a ministry, Nadeem. It
Yeah.
was also created that ministries can't deliver. You put professionals there and they report to Prime Minister through, a board. Privatization Commission was never a ministry. So all of these institutions were captured by politicians and bureaucrats, which systematically, marginalized the professionals and took over and made them ministries. Now, a ministry, as you know, by culture and nature, they are not there to deliver. They are basically to process things only. There's no outcome orientation or accountability or transparency in the structure of the ministry. So we converted these technical spaces into ministries. Now, you cannot reverse it. I had, very powerful secretaries under me in Board of Investment, DMGs, but they could not even read a balance sheet. So how would they talk to an investor? So my question is that can we delegate and deregulate even small, things? Now we have SIFC as well on top of that. So why don't you merge? At one point in time, we had CPEC authority as well. Then we have TDAP trying to do promotional events. And now Prime Minister Secretariat, I got a call from somebody that they have an investment promotion wing, which has received, a report from
Yeah.
Adam Smith Institute to set up a new investment promotion authority, IPA. Now, so when they came to me, so I just wrote, a very senior level person sent me, sir, what do you think? So I just wrote a big NO. I said, close down others or merge others rather than creating, these new bodies. But I don't think our advice has any value. I'm glad that they stopped that. Otherwise, there would have been another body and some of the retired bureaucrats would have
No,
got a
they've
nice.
got SIFC. They've got SIFC now. So, I mean, we've got another investment body. But it's good. Coming to this very interesting question, we seem to be multiplying bodies by the minute. I mean, we set
It's
up in
maximizing budget. That's what I
we
said, what Weber said. This is a tool to maximize budget.
yeah, but the point is the IMF's job is to look at the budget. The IMF is asking us to collect more and more taxes. We keep asking for more taxes, whereas the government expands further. So if the government is going to keep expanding further and further, no amount of taxation will solve the problem. We have set up, if I count right, since in this IMF program, something like 15 new agencies. There's a Sahulat agency, sorry, Sahulat Bazaar agency in Punjab. There are 3 digital agencies come up. A new Nadra has come up. We have set up.
And we call them authorities.
We call them
You
authorities, right?
So the word goes that, that
Exactly.
you are controlling.
Now the question is, if we don't have any process, if you will recall, you worked in other countries. In the US, to create an agency requires a whole process. They have to do a cost benefit analysis, the congressional budget has to come into action, a law has to be passed, something has to be discussed, etc. So the US can't set up an authority all the time. I think in the UK government, you'll also, the government very well. Can the UK government set up authorities readily as they like? Or is there a process to set up a new government, new agency, sorry?
I think these are the questions which we need to ponder. That I genuinely, as you know, I have spent almost 25 years in multilateral and bilateral world. I genuinely believe that they are not at all geared or serious about reforms. Okay. They are basically representing a shareholders club, which is, providing lending to countries and remaining, and basically they would like those countries to remain dependent on them. Okay. The promotion systems and incentive system within the structure is how much money you lend, rather than what is the outcome you have achieved. So that is also an international bureaucracy. And the club, I'm sorry to say, since I have seen it from the shareholder side when I was in UK, the club has become far more politically oriented than technically oriented in the past few years. I can give you example when I was in the government. So, Alice Wells from the US used to come, and she would say that IMF mission will not come unless you link, this whole FATF deliberations as part of the prior actions. Now, FATF has nothing to do with directly with IMF. So they will put pressure linked, things in that. And Pakistani government and other developing countries should realize that if they want an honorable exit from this whole capture, this elite, which is dependent and their friends and families and everybody is part of the system, will not do it. It has to be done by private sector if they stand up. I don't see private sector standing up and raising the voice about these issues. Rather, they are quietly basically moving out of the country. Look at the number of companies registered in Dubai last month. Almost Pakistan was second after India. So people are, clearly using regional markets which offer better structures.
But let me ask you the question. Fundamentally, are we a capitalist economy, a market economy, or are we a Soviet economy? There are two types of economies in the world. One is the capitalist economy, the other is the Soviet economy, right? Or let's say the communist economy. The capitalist economy, even though it might do welfare, it might do have social security, etc., but it works on market principles. I mean, you allow markets to operate. Yes, you do welfare, you do equalization, but you do have a market economy. In Pakistan, I don't see that. We like to control prices. The DC fixes prices. We like to do this sugar nonsense that's happening now. Export sugar, import sugar. They're
It
all done.
happens every year.
Yeah. So, I mean, are we really a capitalist economy, or we haven't made up our minds?
I think two things. First of all, if I look at past 20 years or so, gradually the reliance on market to operate or build a market as an institution has deteriorated. Okay. Everything has become G to G, the government to government, basically, as I say, a geopolitical rent from your, other places, trying to do big transactions. So market has shrunk and market has kind of taken a back seat as well. And that's a worrisome thing if you think seriously. Any country which has grown on sustainable based in the recent past, it is the markets that take the lead. Here, the state has clearly captured. And then state has deliberately created lots of crony capitalists, and those crony capitalists basically have, I also saw in past 25 years, how their influence on policy has increased over time. They can get anything done because of, this few people, a club mentality deciding about it. So I don't see Pakistan as a market economy, but it is not even, a centralized control, communist kind of economy. So it's a confused economic structure, I would say, which does not know which direction to take or what model to pick up.
But
market has shrunk. I very clearly see their influence, their operational space. It is the state which has expanded.
okay, now here again we see that we have some idea of a structural reform for the IMF. For example, the IMF could very easily turn around and tell the government, look, stop fixing prices, open out the sugar market, import, whatever this is, and stop this DC rate nonsense, and stop this nonsense of Prime Minister yelling, go do Sahulat Bazaar. All this nonsense has to be stopped. So that's one thing. But the other side of capitalism that I see, Haroon, which I want to bring to your attention because of your past, capitalist economies thrive on financial capital. Right? Capitalist economy, one of the reasons after the Renaissance the West took off is because they developed these markets, specifically stock markets or nascent bond markets, or basically ability to trade capital. This is the one big thing that happened. And the second big thing that happened, I guess, I'm being very crude, but it's important sometimes to take crude approaches. Second big thing was to develop these accounting mechanisms, double entry accounting, which allowed you to develop balance sheets and take stock of your position in the situation. That helped financial markets take off. And you see East India Company, what it did. The invention of the company itself was very important. Now, you've been in SCCP. Permit me to say this, or you can correct me. SCCP has been a big failure in this country. It has not developed the market at all. It has created jobs for people who came there, enjoyed themselves, and left, but the stock market is trivial. At the same time, I don't see any country that can grow without serious companies. My famous sort of whatever notion that I, or quip that I say is the modern day army is a company. In the old days, Alexander had armies to go and conquer people. Today, you have companies that go and, through exports, conquer the world. Now, we don't have any companies. I have done this analysis. Most of the companies are less than $1 billion. Malaysian companies I've checked, they're worth 37, $40 billion. Dubai companies are 37, 40, $50. Indian companies are 300, $400 billion. If you don't have big companies and if they're not trading on the stock market, I've also checked on the stock market. The reason I call it a failure is because there's no real company in the stock market. The biggest company is OGDC, which is a joke. How can a government-led company be the biggest company, right? At the same time, all other companies, the states own the company. They're non-professionals. There's no market for professional CEOs. Maybe there's only one company, Engro, that has a professional CEO. The rest are just all. So again, this is a sign of not being a capitalist economy. So in this area, what reform would you suggest?
I would, first of all, I'm forgetting the name of one of my teacher at LSC, the Indian gentleman with lots of white hair, Lord
Magnet Desai.
Magnet Desai. So when I was joining LSC, I went to him, sorry, SCCP, when Shaukat Aziz reached out to me. So I went to him that, I'll be creating, in part of the team, creating a new financial regulatory setup. So he asked me two questions. He said, what is your constituency? I said, why are you asking me that? He said, the government wouldn't like you because you are taking their powers away. It created, under an Asian Development Bank capital market development loan. And he said that constituency will vanish once the loan vanishes, right? So I think he was absolutely right, because that is what, it has become, unfortunately, that it had some muscle in the beginning because of a donor pressure, because donor had to show certain results, but then it got captured and, basically both market capture as well as bureaucratic capture. So that's number one. And that's the sad case of all regulatory bodies, so-called what they call independent regulatory bodies, they all got captured. Because these were, most of that, including Competition Commission, were created under a multilateral program, lending program, So as the program ended, so these bodies became, with zero constituency. Now, that is where the role of real entrepreneurship comes in, that there are people who stand up and demand regulation, which can help them expand. Why companies are not expanding? There is a cultural factor as well, by the way, because, for instance, let's take Sialkot as an example, one of the richest, people in terms of export orientation. But there is only one listed company out of Sialkot, and that got listed several years back, Grace of Cambridge. So families, I have brought in, $300 million to $500 million of capital offers to these companies. They go and consult, and then they come back to me that family doesn't agree. We don't want to let control go. When I give them examples of large, billionaires in the world who control 8% stake in their companies, but still manage control. Now, that corporate governance model has not been, looked into to promote and create incentives. Stock market created only tax incentives, so companies got listed. In fact, we should write a book about it. Phenomenal, quotes from our top level capitalists. One gentleman who is in the top 10 companies came to me and he said, can't you just disband annual general meetings? Public bothers us a lot, So the question is that they basically, if you look at the board members of most listed companies, 75% is family, and then because of the corporate governance regulation, they put an independent director, but they are not independent. But the mindset of, using. Second is the financial system. we became a bank, commercial bank-based financial system over the years. Okay. First of all, multilateral funded development banks or DFIs disappeared, but we never created incentives for people to come up with risk capital or venture capital or even bond market expansion. I remember giving a talk about what is bond market in late 90s in Karachi. Javed Masood and I, he was in Pakra and there was a seminar. Now, all I'm trying to say is, but bond market, there was nobody interested, neither on the demand side nor on the supply side. So nobody created incentive. I worry about, the financial market, which is short-term commercial bank, oriented, because commercial banks are not, as risk-taking institutions. So unless you take some risks and fund entrepreneurs and ideas and small companies, I don't will remain captured in this happy family of few large companies just borrowing from, banks and remaining goes to the government. So how do you develop the market if the financial system does not support it? Regulatory system is incapable and the mindset of ruling elite remains very state-centric. So I think these things are something to think about.
But I agree with you entirely. But the point is, look, what can we do to make these companies go forward? For example, I would say one radical solution, obviously I wouldn't recommend it wholeheartedly, but I think it's worth thinking about. Why should we not raise interest rates instead of lowering them? These guys are all yelling about lowering interest rates because they want to continue with the bank-based system. Now, if I remember right, the first theorem in finance is the Modigliani-Miller theorem, which says that under certain conditions, whatever, debt and equity must be similarly priced because, that's how the market works. Our equity seems to be extremely expensive because they don't want to give it up. And debt seems to be very cheap and they keep shouting for more debt. Now, should we not, for example, the fund can equally argue in their, again, thing that either you unlock the equity, bring it into the market so that the risk market develops, or alternatively, we want to raise interest rates. So I think these are also things that we should think about. But related to this is the issue that I know you've been on the donor side too. There have been lots of loans and technical advice for financial market development, as well as for tax, improvement. Did that money contribute anything to our development, and did that technical assistance really help us?
No, it's a window dressing. I have been the lead from both sides. When I was in SCCP, I was the lead on capital market development program, $700 million. Out of that $700 million, $690 million went to the budget of the government because it was a budget support operation. And 10 million was technical assistance under which, you set up clearing houses and other things. But that was all the lead manager from ADB start getting promotions because I was ticking his boxes. But it had very little to do with understanding capital market and expanding the base. It is still limited to 3 cities. We're very narrow base. There are no saving instruments being, floated. So this is a window dressing. I don't think any of these governance or nutrition, as long as it's a budget support operation, the finance minister is only interested in ticking boxing and taking money into the budget, So, but that is where the failure of multilateral system is evident. Some countries have reached out to me, both developed and developing, who are now looking at when she says, what can we do? I think we need to join hands in challenging the multilateral system's effectiveness and their instruments. I know in UK now they have formed something which is actually pushing that rather than direct lending on balance sheet, use guarantees more, basically bring private sector money into it and, let governments learn how to deal with markets, That's one voice which reached out to me about 6 months back and I'm working with them. But it's a long process. I think reforming a bureaucracy is a nightmare and reforming a national bureaucracy, you might as well close it rather than reforming it. but they have multilateral system of financial institutions has failed. I'm very clear about it. They have failed in terms of delivering results which was expected. They have succeeded in making countries more and more indebted. At one point in time, remember, there was a HIPIC initiative, which was highly indebted poor countries to write off the loans. And then the gentleman who was chief economist, what was his name, who wrote the book, White Man's Burden?
So, realistically,
Yeah, Bill. So Bill Easterly came to London and I had a discussion with him. At that time, I was not in his 90s. And he said that if we write off loans of these poor countries in Africa, they are going to borrow again and they will have weak governance structure and they will do the same, what they're doing now. So I asked him a very simple, innocent question. I said, as an investment banker, what I see is that if there's a bad client, I would not lend it to them again. So why do you give money again? He said, no, 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 we have to give them in any case. So that model, the structure is, old school. It has basically lived its life. And I think Trump, in a way, I support Trump in certain things, that this whole subsidies and all that, structure, he's basically separating geopolitics from commercial deals, if I look at it. And that is something we need to look at it, that, taking loans and everything based on because you're a member of this big club. So that change, I think eventually regional multilateralism will come up. This global multilateralism will shrink. Already people, if ODA stops, contributing, I think World Bank size will go in half. I challenge Christina Georgieva, and I worked for briefly together when she was World Bank and when she was in EU. At that time, if the cheaper money, which is IDA credit, is taken out of the World Bank system, I think no government will even talk to that system, because they say this AAA work and advisory is very good, but frankly, it is the cheaper lending which makes them attractive to finance ministers.
But finally, let me just ask you, I think it'll be a very interesting discussion and we should do more of this because it leading in many different directions. It occurs to me that perhaps, I mean, a book that I never took seriously, but perhaps that is now the most informative book, Diary of an Economic Hitman.
Yeah.
I think the multilateral system, and we also, the developing countries, we basically, one thing to recognize is we didn't get any, we didn't fight for freedom. We got our freedom on a plate. It was given to us. The maps were drawn for us. And we kind of got these, and most of the Africa, most of us have maps drawn for us and given a system of colonial governance that we inherited. We didn't fight for it, we didn't argue, etc., etc. We're not like Vietnam or these other countries that fought for their independence. Now, the second thing is that when we became independent, immediately we were told that your biggest problem is finance. I remember the famous two-gap model, which said that you're short of dollars and short of savings, which was converted into what I call the Haque model, which is the Mahbub al Haq, our advisory group model, which basically puts us in this mode that we are short of dollars and we have to have projects and we have to borrow money, and that's the only way we can grow. Our savings is too low. We can't save enough to make our investments. Now, given this, the world has changed. The world has changed dramatically. And in fact, my friend and classmate and my author, Paul Romer and Robert Lucas, came up with this idea of endogenous growth, which talks about, and as Paul Romer said, the poor countries are not short of objects of finance. They're short of ideas. Now, the question is, should we be concerned about finance so much? Is finance the biggest constraint that we have, or is it ideas?
Finance is the biggest constraint as far as state is concerned. It has very little to do as what people are concerned. It has very little, because it's basically state finance. It has very little to do market and people lives. So I don't. It's basically, there's an economy of the state and there's an economy of the people. And the fact in Pakistan is that half the people are under the poverty line or at the poverty line. In terms of this whole multilateral debate, I think we are more colonized than what we were before in several ways. We are more, closed society in terms of ideas and debate, what we used to be. And the societies which have opened up to people and ideas and exchanges of both human capital as well as goods and services have thrived. The, we are more landlocked than than Central Asia, frankly. Because we have closed our borders. And when you close your borders, you're landlocked, So you don't let things go and come. You don't let people exchanges. So at this mindset, I really don't know how to change it, frankly speaking. It has captured the power, and they believe, or they are made to believe by both their local and international partners, that that's the way to go, because they gold plate everything they do. So that's all I can.
So
Mahathir Mohamad gave this book to Imran Khan in our first visit, that please look at this book and watch out your currencies and everything. So, this economic hitman, consciously, unconsciously, in a structured manner or way, it hasn't helped. And we need to, and our bankers, our friends, they haven't helped either. Pakistani banks, what role they have played in economic growth is just in front of you.
Now, very quickly again, this financial markets have developed dramatically in our lifetimes. I mean, given the technology, given things, for example, I remember when I went abroad to LSE, just like you went to study. I mean, sending money overseas was a huge issue. In fact, the first time I ever saw a foreign currency was when I went to LSE. We couldn't see a foreign currency here, right? And there was no way that I could remit money from here. I remember I wanted to buy $1 worth of comic book subscription and I couldn't get it. In order to apply to foreign universities, in the American universities had these fees. State Bank wouldn't give me permission to send fees, $20 fee to apply for American universities. So I had to ask some friends overseas to send those fees, right? Now, financial markets have developed enormously. Today, you and I can push money back and forth. And at the same time, in those old days, if you recall, the Pakistan government had no ability to issue bonds or anything like that. Today, financial markets are brimming with cash. And if you present, the only thing that is required is presenting a viable plan or a viable proposition. And the financial market will fund it. So where is the market failure that we need multilateral funding? Why do you think that regional banks or multilateral funding should be available? So what
Because
they've done
it is easier. It is easier because regional countries would like to have more influence in Pakistan, the way West used to have. I think the same model will be replicated. Going to markets actually need a value proposition which market buys into. Okay. I give you a recent example. There's a lot of liquidity for this so-called sustainable, finance globally. When Pakistan had these floods and these guys going to Geneva, for my sins, I advised the UN for a few years. I told them that basically there is no free money available there. Okay. So you come up with governance structures which inspire confidence of these investors and also come up with some viable propositions. Okay. At the last minute, again, everything was about this loss and damage fund, that basically a free money, give it to state as, because it's your fault. And what we got, that loss and damage fund as of today globally has received $400 million. Now, it's a changing world. Trump has told you that aid is no more an instrument of influence. Other countries are going to follow that. This multilateral cheaper money will have so many conditions that it will become very difficult for politicians to absorb in a very demanding young population. Now, if we don't find alternative, structures to reach out to market and build confidence, there's a lot of liquidity within the region, but that liquidity will not come to Pakistan for two reasons. Number one, rule of law, is property rights and their money safe? B, do they have an exit comfort that they can exit from this country? If we have, indirect capital controls and things, which we have, even repatriation of profits, that money can always find alternate markets in the region. But I can tell you, it's mind-boggling the numbers of liquidity available and our inability to tap into that.
No, I think that's absolutely correct. So thank you very much. We've come to I think we're running out of time, not ideas. We've got a lot to discuss, but we'll do this again, inshallah. But I think a number of things that come out of this is, A, we need to get to deeper structural reforms, and I hope the IMF will listen. They need to talk to domestic intellect and listen to domestic intellect. I've done this many times in my life. You've done it too. Going to a country for 2 weeks on a mission, it's wonderful. I enjoyed it enormously, sitting in a 5-star hotel. But I had the sneaking suspicion I didn't know much about the country. Yeah, I could read and write a report very easily. After all, I was trained to do that. So I used to tell the friends that I made in that country that, look, I'm writing for my bosses, not for you. I don't know your country well enough. I think that's important. And the issues that we raised is that, for example, things like they should close down some extraneous agencies, planning, BY, etc. Lots of agencies that need to be closed down. Expanding role of government, there should be expenditure reviews very, very readily, and transparency in the budget should be created. And disability, I find this amazing that you have this, you sell a loan for a purpose like SECP development or whatever, but give it to the budget. So in a sense, that's non-transparent, that's dark, and that should not be.
Absolutely. That's window dressing.
Yeah, so we should think about it. And this technical assistance nonsense has to kind of recognize that, this is not 1940s. In the even when I was learning economics, 1970s and 80s, there was some information in the World Bank or the IMF report that was, not available elsewhere. But today, unfortunately, with the internet, God, there's so much information available that I don't know what the reports mean now. So why do they write 100 to 200-page report? Because, hey, the information is already available. And why do you spend $1 million? Because each report costs $1 million. When you put in their staff, it costs a lot of money. So why do you do it? So I think we can do that. But Pakistan now is facing an existential crisis. And we should get very serious about making the reform. Quite frankly, the situation recently that we've seen, terrorism, etc., and we don't do terrorism on this podcast, we don't talk about that, politics, etc., but the roots of that lie in economics. And we have to be very clear, the roots lie in economics, and we should think about that. So Haroon, thank you very much. It's always wonderful to talk to you. And we will do this again, because quite frankly, the whole point of holding these SIA conversations is to try and educate the ordinary public, especially students, let them learn. And I think it's time for us to give back through these podcasts. So thank you very much once again.
And very much. Have a good weekend.
All the best. Bye-bye.